You've mentioned, just referencing this game, uh, on a Reddit AMA, that long time ago during Redguard, the lead programmer made all the buildings hop up and down after you played for 10 minutes just to mess with me. Just a curious tangent. What's involved with programming an open world game? So we will talk about design and so on, but specifically the programming, because I think this question came from what are some interesting sticky bugs that you've encountered throughout your life in creating these games? And this is one of them that you mentioned. So what are some of the challenges of programming these open world games?
I mean, there are different flavors of them, right? Your GTAs will have different issues than, the Ubisoft games versus our games. I can sort of, speak to ours, which is you want to build systems, right? Because they're gonna play the game for a very long time as well, which we've learned, and you can't go through and touch everything by hand per se.
Mhm.
So you have to rely on some systemic level of creation and a lot of systems that are robust enough so that when they touch another one, things aren't breaking apart.
So there's like what are the major systems? Is there like the physics of the game, the engine of how like stuff, yeah, like the physics, the motion, and maybe how light is rendered and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So you have the rendering,
Mhm.
right? Of like, okay, this is how I'm going to render the data that I have. So a lot of people confuse engines with rendering. I mean, they're combined, obviously, but there's the data you're going to give to a renderer, which is the thing, the audience, that draws the pixels on the screen. So most of the engine is how are you going to bring in that data and give it to the renderer to draw it. So you have that whole system of walking through the world, feeding in the data and drawing it. You then obviously have the physics and the interactivity. What are the things that are there just to be drawn? And what are the things there that are meant to be interacted with and touched? We put a big premium on the ones that can be interacted with and touched, whether it's flowers, whether the trees move, whether you can sleep on the sofa, sit in this chair, pick up all this stuff, bake bread, blah, blah, blah. You then have the AI, which loops in the stuff we talked about earlier in terms of processing everybody, and combat systems, which is a lot of what people end up doing, combat systems on top of that AI. How do they react to those types of things? And then how do they look at the things that can be interacted with? One of my favorite things is when NPCs will go pick up weapons in the world, which you don't see in other games. And the first time you see it in one of ours, it's like very unexpected. Mm-hmm. You can drop like a crazy weapon, be in a fight, and an NPC runs over, picks it up, and uses it on you. It's not something you would expect. But I love that stuff.
And that's integrated into a larger system, the ability to pick up the NPC picking up. So it's not like a little quirk that's hard coded in. It's part of a bigger system.
They have their own AI for scanning the environment, and that's one of the rules. Hey, is there a weapon that is better than the one I have? I'm going to go get it. Now, we do lock off if it's in a chest, and that's treasure we left for the player. But it's in particular, because what you don't want, we actually had this problem. It started in Oblivion, I believe, which is we set up a level. Hey, let the enemies go pick up the weapons if they're better. So we make a level and go in, and all of the enemies are armed to the teeth, and there's no treasure for the player because the enemies went and took all the good weapons. And he's like, okay, they don't take those. They take the ones that are dropped by other NPCs or the player.
That's such a fascinating world of the designing the experience for the NPC, because in part that experience is defines the experience of the player. So how they interact with their environment defines how the player experiences their environment. Is there room for further and further development of the AI that controls the NPC?
Sure, we're always iterating on it. And again, as we look in the future, it's more about us finding those more reactivity to the player and also understanding their roles in the world. So they're not just there. They're not just there for the player as a signpost for the player.
But they're reacting to the player. But what about, some of the richest experiences we have with people is like the chaos of it, the push and pull, the unpredictability. Is there something, I don't know if you've been following, but the quick, amazing development of language models, the neural network, natural language processing systems, dialogue systems. Do you think there's some possibility of using sort of these incredible neural nets that can have open-ended dialogue, basically chatbots?
Yep. I've seen some incredible demos. I do think it's coming. I don't know when.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a question like what's ready for real deployment and release versus, hey, let's use that to generate some things that is then static that we're giving to the players versus
Yeah.
it's generated on the fly, but it's definitely coming. It's definitely coming. And I think you'll see it in the types of games that we do. It has great, application.
I love the idea that you'd be using AI to design different NPCs and then testing if they're good enough. If they're like a little too crazy, you don't want like the super
right. But if we go back
ones.
to it being reactive, some of that bot stuff, it's incredible. It's then translating that into voice, and then is that being done by the client? Is it being done on a server? Is it baked into the game? There's like different flavors of it.
So there's still computational challenges. Like, how do you actually make that happen?
Right.